Good morning and welcome to the Wednesday, April 3rd, 2024 Public Safety and Justice Subcommittee meeting. I'd like to call the meeting to order, and we will first go to our attorney, Jennifer Vega, to explain public comment.
Madam Chair and committee members, during citizen comment, members of the public may address the subcommittee for up to 3 minutes on issues of interest or concern to them. The Arizona Open Meetings Law permits the subcommittee members to listen to the comments, but prohibits members from discussing or acting on the matters presented. Members of the public may speak for up to 2 minutes to comment on agenda items to be discussed. Comments must be related to the agenda item and the action being considered by the subcommittee. The City Council and staff cannot discuss or comment on matters related to pending investigations, claims, or litigation.
Thank you so much. And now we will allow our interpreter to introduce themselves. Today we have Elsie Duarte.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, my name is Elsie Duarte. I will be servicing as Spanish interpreter for today's Public Safety and Justice Subcommittee session. I will now take a moment to introduce myself to our Spanish-speaking audience and review some guidelines. Buenos días, bienvenidos a la sesión de la Subcomisión de Seguridad Pública y Justicia. Mi nombre es Elsie Duarte y estaré sirviéndoles hoy como intérprete a nuestra audiencia de habla hispana. Deseamos pedirles antemano, si va a dar un comentario público, por favor, hable despacio, con claridad y evite tener distracciones de fondo. Finalmente, pause después de cada 1 o 2 oraciones para poder interpretar lo que esté diciendo de la manera más completa posible. Gracias. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Our first item of business is approval of the minutes from March 2024. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second. I have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion passes unanimously. Item 2 on our agenda today is a proposed amendment to camping ordinance, and for that item, we will hear from Assistant City Attorney Luke Christian. Good morning.
Good morning, Chairwoman, members of the subcommittee. My name is Luke Christian. I'm an assistant city attorney. I'm here to talk about the camping ordinance today. Let's just begin with a little bit of background. The city does not allow camping that blocks streets, sidewalks, or alleys, in parks, in canals or washes, or in the area covered by the state court order. And our current city code, 2330A, says in part, it shall be unlawful for any person to camp in any park or preserve, or in any building, facility, or parking lot or structure, or on any property adjacent thereto that is owned, possessed, and controlled by the city. The potential addition that we're here to talk about today would add language that would ban camping on public property within 500 feet of schools, licensed child care centers, homeless shelters, and outdoor facilities. And the language would require signage to inform the public of this prohibition, and the terms, the important terms used are all defined. The potential language would state, it shall be unlawful for any person to camp in the following locations: within 500 feet of any school or child care facility, provided conspicuous notice of the camping prohibition is posted in the area, and within 500 feet of any shelter, provided conspicuous notice, again, is posted. The language would define child care facility in accordance with Arizona state law, same with school. And shelter would be defined as a facility or outdoor space, the primary purpose of which is to provide free or low-cost temporary or transitional living accommodations to homeless persons. Violations for punishment for violations of this language would be a Class 1 misdemeanor, which under the city code is punishable by a fine up to $2,500, imprisonment up to 6 months, or up to 3 years probation. City Code 2330 is currently under a court order and ongoing federal litigation, which says that we must offer shelter or have an alternative public space for folks to go before enforcing. Also want to note that the U.S. Supreme Court is reviewing these issues this term in the Grants Pass case. Thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you so much. I know that we have some folks for public comment. We'd like to go to that now.
Madam Chair, our first public comment for item 2 is Cody Bradford.
Hi. I work in harm reduction and volunteer outreach with unsheltered folks. I've talked to people who have been unsheltered for a decade plus, and some of these people have fought with these laws for their entire existence almost. Like, one man got out of prison for an 8-year sentence and was living in Cortez Park, and I asked him to come down to the Brian Garcia Welcome Center with me to reclaim his belongings that were confiscated by ambiguously the city. There were Community Bridges was up there, Parks and Rec was up there. They were throwing people's belongings into the backs of trailers without taking inventory of anything. And when I talked to this man, he said that he didn't want to come down because he's been arrested for trying to reclaim his belongings before. He had an officer on Phoenix PD after him and sent people out to harm him, put him in the hospital, and when he came to from being in the hospital, the officer was there doing the incident report and sent him out after being vaccinated for Hep C, and then was vaccinated again for Hep C a week later in the park on issue of this officer. He's been arrested 56 times for trespassing.
Thank you for your testimony. Our next speaker.
Our next speaker is Tony Harris.
Thank you, City Council. With this new ordinance, you're going to push people 500 feet back from different, from schools and parks and everything. It's going to get to the point where they would probably have to leave the state if they're not offered housing. And a lot of people have criminal records, and they're going to be denied housing for apartments and what have you, where it's hard to get your record expunged because a lot of people can't afford attorneys to represent them for their cases. And if you start arresting people for this, all you're going to do is pack the jails. So you're making it more inconvenient for them. And a lot of these people, homeless people, would prefer to be closer to the Cass campus because that's where their resources are. So if you make it hard for them to get resources, like if they leave their property, someone can steal their belongings, or if it's at a park or something like that, their belongings can be easily stolen or thrown away by the Parks and Recs department. And I don't know, I haven't heard yet about any new shelters to accommodate the demand for these homeless people, to the point they're going to have nowhere to go. Like I said, unless they leave the area. So, thank you.
Thank you for your comment.
Our final speaker for this item is Elizabeth Venable.
Okay, hi, Elizabeth Venable, Phoenix resident, born and raised here, and founder of Fund for Empowerment, which is the organization that has the federal lawsuit against the city of Phoenix. You've heard some of our members speak. You've also, I know the people on the council have seen our members in various different events, trainings, even if it wasn't necessarily obvious. In any case, what I wanted to say is that about a year ago, we filed for this thing called contempt of court, because we allege you guys have not stopped the street level enforcement primarily of the camping law, even though you've been stopped from doing it officially. From testimonies over and over and over again, we hear about people having their belongings still being thrown away and still being faced with the only option is criminalization. It's not acceptable, and I don't know if you know, this is not in your interest, especially some of you who may not want to receive misdemeanor federal convictions for violating a federal civil rights injunction. I mean, okay, I was part of the movement, and I'm probably running, I got a lot of time. In any case, I was part of the movement for many years to get accountability for Sheriff Joe Arpaio. And I'd like to tell you, I don't know if you know this, but this is the same judge that gave Sheriff Joe Arpaio his federal misdemeanor conviction for contempt of court. If you were to pass and enforce this within anything related to our injunction, which you know that our injunction isn't necessarily going to go away even after the Supreme Court rules, which is because we have more amendments to the Constitution that we have evidence that you guys are violating. So even if they totally get rid of Martin v. Boise, you know, you could still get these charges. And I would recommend that you do not vote for this in your own self-interest.
Your comments. Okay. Councilman Waring?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate you taking this first. I'm sorry, I'm sitting in a little room at the airport, so I got a flight here, so I appreciate you doing this first so I can speak about it. We have to do something, and this is certainly not going to be the end of the story. Our attorney mentioned the case at the U.S. Supreme Court, which could change the whole dynamic of this issue. I had a very well-written email. I don't know if you all received it. I do not believe it was someone who lived in District 2. I apologize for not remembering. I think it was a female, the woman's name, who wrote me. But she asked, why aren't we doing more bus stops and so forth? Excellent question, because if we pass something today just for her edification, it doesn't mean we can't do something else later. And I think, Lori, it would be fair to say that until the Supreme Court case comes down and we have a little more clarity from the feds about what we can and can't do, this is at least the start, correct?
Madam Chair, Councilman Waring, members of the subcommittee, yes, from my understanding, I would say that that's fair. And as you know, the legal landscape changes, if it does change, then we can always bring back further information for the council's consideration.
Thank you. And Madam Chair, I would say, so the first speaker mentioned a lot of things that one person had told him. I'm sorry, who knows, you know, was that person there to witness all these stories? That was a lot of anecdote, but I didn't necessarily hear a whole lot of demonstrable facts that can be applied in the aggregate. I think it's sad that sub shop owner, after his legal travails and putting up, frankly, with us for 30 years, you know, they finally packed it in. So for those, I appreciate your good intentions, but like the last speaker, you know, if your behavior is making it so people can't enjoy their homes. They have to close their business. They can't use the bus stop. To the first speaker, if you're living in the park so kids can't use it and there's needles around or whatever, that's not justice. That's not anything good. That's wrong. We invest a lot of resources in these facilities so that citizens can use them. And I get too many complaints in my office where people say, I can't use the facilities that I pay taxes for, that you guys dedicated tens of millions of dollars for, because I don't feel safe there, or my kid almost stepped on a needle, and on and on and on. So at some point, to these long-term case studies that were just mentioned, you got to help yourself too. You can't just say, this is how I'm going to do it, and I don't care if I wreck it for everybody else. That's not acceptable in any way, shape, or form. So to me, this is a small first step to reclaiming rights for citizens that we should never have given up in the first place. And I'm not sure why we did. We're talking about this for years. So I appreciate you bringing this forward, Manager. I appreciate all your work on it. Lori and your staff, appreciate you also indulging my thoughts about this over many years. So this is a good first step in changing things. I will also say, for those who are curious what this looks like, I call in a lot of folks who are panhandling in the medians, taking up the space at the bus stop. Nobody else can use the bus stop. It's their personal bus stop. 7th Avenue comes to mind. So drive up 7th Avenue to the 10 from Jefferson. See what you see. Is that a great look for the city? Keep in mind, a lot of our winter visitors are getting off the freeways at major interchanges like 7th Avenue. So I stopped calling in to police to see what would happen. Wow. I just think at some level, you're not doing the people who are out there any favors. People are dying in the streets. Enabling the behavior that's leading to that is not helpful. So again, you may look at me as the devil. Frankly, I'm not sure I'm that worried about that. My conscience is clear. We need to spend resources on this, but we also need people to be incentivized to help themselves. And to say you can never use a bus stop on 7th Avenue, or there's going to be people, riding their bikes into traffic. I see that all the time. You go on and on and on. The lawlessness, it has to stop. So I'll stop there, Madam Chair. But if you want an example of what I'm talking about, go up 7th Avenue. I will also add, we just spent a lot of time a couple of weeks ago talking about preserving a ceiling on a building that's on 7th Avenue. I've driven by that building about 10,000 times. Never noticed the building. We'll probably never go look at the ceiling. I'm too busy dodging bicyclists, riding against traffic, crossing Grand Avenue, whatever, to really pay attention. But I do think that was indicative of misplaced priorities. We should have been focused on this all along. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Waring. Now we'll go to Councilwoman Cuadrado.
Thank you, Chairwoman. I first want to start with a couple of questions. You mentioned something about that we need to make sure that we have enough beds before we can enforce this. Is that true? Or what happens when people are on the 500 feet and they're camping there? What happens then?
Chairwoman, subcommittee members, I would prefer to get into specific factual circumstances in an e-session. Don't want to be giving legal advice on specific circumstances in a public meeting.
But we're talking about, well, you need to answer the question because I'm being asked to vote on this item and I need to know maybe we should have done it the other way around and taken this item then to e-session and get all those answers to those questions. I think now we're at a place where if I'm going to vote yes on this, I need you to be able to answer those questions.
Chairwoman, subcommittee members, so the injunction that we did discuss that you're asking about, it does require that before we enforce 2330, that there is an offer of shelter or an alternative public space for people to camp.
And what happens if there's no beds available?
That would certainly impact our ability to enforce. But as I mentioned, the injunction does also allow that if there's alternative public spaces for people to camp, enforcement could be an option in those circumstances as well.
Is Rachel here?
Madam Chair, Councilwoman Rachel Milne with the Office of Homeless Solutions is coming up.
Rachel, how many beds do we have available today?
Mayor, or excuse me, subcommittee, members of council. So it changes on a daily basis. We typically have around a handful of beds available at any given time in our system. We do have 790 in various stages of construction right now, but on a daily basis, it does fluctuate based on availability.
So if this policy were to pass in the next month or in the next 2 weeks, how many beds would there be available for folks?
Councilwoman, we don't anticipate bringing on any new beds in the next few weeks, so we would still be in the current situation utilizing beds that are available based on natural people leaving to go either to housing or other locations in our current system.
So just to clarify, we're gonna pass this policy, but if we don't have any beds available, then it's gonna be impossible to be able to enforce the 500 feet. Is that correct?
Chairwoman, subcommittee members, no, I don't think that's correct. As I mentioned, the injunction allows alternative public spaces, not necessarily only shelter.
So the only thing they would have to move is just get away from the 500 feet, and then they would be able to camp there. Is that what we're saying?
Chairwoman, subcommittee members, assuming there was no other violation of law, yes, I believe that's correct.
So the only thing we're doing with this policy is we're just moving people 500 feet over. That's what we're doing. Because we don't see that many beds. I mean, we don't have more beds coming in online, at least for another few months, right, Rachel?
That is correct.
Okay, well, seems like that's what we like to do, right? So for me, as a mom of 2 young boys, I understand, I see it, I see the challenges in my district, I see the challenges in the schools that I represent. I see a lot of my parks, I see a lot of the issues that we have in our city, in our district. I sympathize with all of the families that say that they cannot use the parks. Like, for example, at Homestead Park, one of the parks in my district, we had to lock the gates, we had to activate the neighbors. And I think there's a lot of different solutions that we can actually bring to these challenges. I think my team, and working together with Rachel and working together with everyone else, we've been able to do a lot of improvements in a lot of the parks in my district, where we've been able to activate the neighbors, where we've been able to start new neighborhood associations, and I just don't think that this is the solution. I really think that, this is, we are only gonna put a piece of paper that says you cannot camp 500 feet from where a school is at, but other than that, there doesn't seem to be other solutions. I think the answer is different. I think that what we should be doing is being able to add on more beds into the city of Phoenix. We continue to put the beds in the same part of the city. I think that is a huge challenge. Instead of us sitting here pretending that we're doing something, we should actually do something that's going to have like a real impact on the community, not just moving the problem 500 feet. And today I am going to be supporting this item, but I am hopeful that we can bring in real solutions, that by the time it gets to the council, by the time it gets to a vote for the 9 of us to be able to vote, that we have some real solutions to this. Because moving people 500 feet is not the answer. Because they're going to move into our alleys, they're going to move into other parts of the districts, they're going to move into different parts of the parks, into different parts of our schools. And we know that this is just not the answer. Like, I appreciate the work that staff has put into this. I think Rachel has been telling us for a long time now that we need more beds, that we need to do more as a city. I would challenge all of my colleagues to really, figure out places where they can also put, a facility, a hotel, a place where we can house more of our unsheltered people, that we can really come up with those answers that we need. Lori, I think you and I have talked about this as well. I don't think that this is fair for police either, right? That now we're putting one more thing on their plate that they have to go and enforce, and I'm not sure that I would like to see them enforcing these type of situations when there's like so much crime, when there's so many other things that are happening throughout our city. So I would, challenge us and ask us that as we're moving this forward, that we figure out a different solution, that we figure out how is it that we're actually going to implement this, because I just don't think that this is going to do much for our city, for our citizens, and we are just putting in false expectations to our residents that this is actually going to do something, when the only thing we're doing is moving people 500 feet, and if there's no beds available, there's very little that we can do if there's no criminal activity going on. Thank you, Chairwoman.
Thank you, Councilwoman Guardado. Okay, I have a couple of questions. What would happen if the Supreme Court upholds Grant Pass? And does this ordinance meet Grants Pass?
Chairwoman, subcommittee members, if the Supreme Court upholds Grants Pass, the status quo would remain as it is now.
And so then this ordinance we could leave it in effect if we pass it?
Chairwoman, I would prefer to get into these details in e-session.
Okay. What would, okay. So I want to go back to Rachel. You said we're bringing on 790 beds. Is the safe outdoor space fully open yet?
Chairwoman, we are bringing 790 beds in various projects over the next several months. And the safe outdoor space is, I'm happy to say, it's at 107 individuals today, and we are open to more individuals as well. So we have the capacity for up to 300 individuals and 200 spaces at that location, yes.
Excellent. And in 2022, is 500 beds about right, about how many we brought on?
A little over, yes, Chairwoman, a little over 500 beds, permanent beds in 2022.
And then we brought on additional temporary beds in 2023, and the number I have is about 480-ish?
That is correct.
Okay. So we have been bringing on additional beds, both permanent ones and then temporary ones when we needed, and we will be rolling some of those off. In addition, a safe outdoor space to provide what I believe we call a low barrier entry. Is a safe outdoor space considered that?
Chairwoman, yes, that is correct.
Okay. So thank you for all of the work you and the city and our city staff have done and the council in supporting that. Additionally, my office has worked with ASU to help develop legal clinic, provide legal resources so that we can ensure folks have a way to get help. In January of this year, with the tremendous help of our staff, community court was opened, which I had to fight for to get open because we want to be able to offer services to folks who are homeless and need help, whether that be addiction services or work development. So I think the city of Phoenix is leading at every step with services and assistance. Not everybody chooses that, I realize, the first time. Sometimes it takes many, many, many times for that to happen. But it is safe to say, in my opinion, that we are leading with services, and our community members want to feel safe in their neighborhoods, and that includes their schools and their daycares where they take their children. It also includes ensuring that our vulnerable population who are trying to get assistance and get out of homelessness at our shelters should be safe and protected as well. So with that, I would be open to a motion.
Move to approve.
And second?
Second.
Motion, I have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, please say nay. Motion approves 3-1. Thank you so much for that. We will go to item 3, which is our opioid response planning environmental scan results. For that, we will have Public Health Advisor Nicole Witt and Dr. Michelle Chioda, from ASU.
Good morning, Chairwoman, members of the subcommittee. I'm pleased to be here this morning to provide an update on the environmental scan and needs assessments supporting opioid response planning. I am joined by our partner, Dr. Chioda, Director of ASU Substance Use and Addiction Translational Research Network, or as we call it, SATRN. For context, fatal overdoses increased 39% between 2019 and 2022. In 2021, the City of Phoenix joined cities, towns, and counties across Arizona, signing on to the One Arizona Memorandum of Understanding, which sets out guidelines for opioid settlements. In 2022, the city began to receive opioid settlement funds, and it's anticipated we will receive funds annually for up to 18 years. In the spring of 2023, the Office of Public Health presented to Council identifying the need to complete a needs assessment to determine the priorities for opioid settlement dollars within the City of Phoenix. And we launched this process in April-May of 2023 with a community opioid education forum in each of our 8 council districts. There were 3 assessments completed in 2023 as part of this process. 2 were led by our partners at Maricopa County Health Department, and a 3rd led by the Office of Public Health in partnership with ASU SATRN. The intent of these assessments were to understand the current landscape of services, the needs of the community, and priorities for action. The substance use needs assessment focused on substance use service providers and response agencies. Through interviews, an online survey, and focus groups, more than 300 agencies were engaged, and majority of these representing agencies in Phoenix. In total, there are more than 30 recommendations in the complete report, categorized into 4 main areas that are shown on the screen. And the full report was completed in July of 23 and can be found on the Maricopa County Health Department website. Service providers and agencies identified several barriers within the current system of services categorized under the areas of prevention, which includes strategies aimed at preventing use or harmful use, harm reduction, which includes strategies aimed at reducing the negative consequences of substance use for current users, and treatment and recovery, which includes programs and services that assist people with managing their substance use in short and long term. The top 5 barriers identified for providers for prevention, as found here, include challenges including funding restrictions to specific populations or services that do not support a focus on prevention, lack of access to early intervention for youth, as prevention resources tend to focus on before use and don't usually address the beginning or early stages of substance use, as well as social media and stigma associated with substance use. When considering what should be funded under prevention, providers' top priorities for prevention funding included services that address substance users at the beginning of their use, so early intervention, increasing programs and settings where K through 12 children are found, such as schools and after-school care, and training and screening for mental health, substance use, and at-risk individuals, as well as targeted media campaigns to increase awareness and reduce stigma were also identified as key priorities. Under the area of harm reduction, top barriers identified included fear of law enforcement, stigma associated with harm reduction services and the people who use them, and lack of awareness and access to harm reduction services generally and overall. When it came to priorities for harm reduction funding, providers identified the need to increase harm reduction outreach, education, and care navigation as an important support for people who are currently using substances, as well as increasing access to harm reduction supplies in the community, including naloxone, and increasing diversion of substance users away from the criminal justice system and into supportive services. Top barriers identified by providers to treatment and recovery services included the unstable or lack of housing, lack of motivation for change, and lack of transportation. As with many other health outcomes and health concerns, it is very challenging for individuals to maintain or have success with any kind of treatment without stable housing and access to reliable transportation, as well as social supports. As well, these barriers and challenges contribute to an overall an individual's motivation for change. It's very difficult to find the will to change or the ability to change when you don't have stable housing and other supports around you. Top funding priorities for treatment and recovery included providing wraparound services and housing for people in treatment and recovery to support their treatment and recovery. In addition, providers identified the need for post-overdose response teams who can respond within 24 and 72 hours of an overdose, as well as navigators and on-call teams that can support people in their journey when they need it, as well as create connections between services. In addition to service providers, an assessment was completed with people who use drugs to gain their perspective on funding and service needs. Overall, 525 people completed this survey, and in addition, 40 one-on-one interviews were completed with people who use drugs and who were also currently homeless at the time of the assessment. It should be noted that overall, a high proportion of the respondents to this survey were currently people experiencing homelessness or who had an experience with homelessness in the past. The report was released in October of 2023 and can also be found on the Maricopa County Health Department website. It includes recommendations within the themes of housing, energy security, drug use, and harm reduction knowledge from the perspective of substance users. And today we'll just focus on the first four. Funding recommendations for treatment included improving overall treatment access, increasing services for basic health needs, and expanding mobile services, so bringing services to people as opposed to requiring them to go to them. Under harm reduction and drug use, people who use drugs identified the need to improve youth prevention, as many acknowledge that their use began in their youth, and improve access to harm reduction interventions as priorities. Housing also emerged as a theme in this assessment with people who use drugs, and recommendations of substance users included increased supports for people who use drugs to find and maintain housing, and reducing barriers to accessing housing and or shelter services. There are many restrictions for substance use, current rules related to sobriety or drug-free housing, which can result in a sudden loss of housing when people temporarily return to use, which is a common part of the recovery journey. And lastly, questions related to heat and energy security were specifically asked, recognizing the overlap between substance use and heat-related death. And people who use drugs noted a need to increase awareness of cooling centers. Many use spaces that were cooling centers but did not realize it, expand the number of centers, and increase the accessibility of those centers to people who use drugs. I will now pass it over to my colleague, Dr. Shiura, who will talk about our community survey.
Microphones.
Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the subcommittee. Thanks for allowing me to join you today. This has been a lovely collaboration, and I look forward to the work that we'll continue to do together. Because the Maricopa County Department of Public Health needs assessments that Nicole just spoke of focused on the perspectives of substance use providers and people who use drugs, we thought it was important to supplement that with hearing the voices of the Phoenix community as well. We conducted a survey assessing Phoenix residents and community members' experiences with substance use-related problems, knowledge and attitudes regarding substance use disorder, and support for specific strategies that are available to alleviate the opioid crisis. This survey was live from August through October of 2023 and was completed by 765 people across the city. Women and white individuals are somewhat overrepresented relative to the Phoenix population, but otherwise, the sample was representative in terms of demographics, particularly in terms of age and income, as well as distribution across districts. And as you can see, when we compare the proportion of survey responses across the 8 districts of the city with the proportion of suspected overdoses, the survey did reasonably well in terms of hearing from those who are impacted to the greatest extent by these issues. What did we hear? Well, the first thing that we heard is that members of the Phoenix community are highly and directly impacted by these issues. Approximately a third of the sample reported having used opioids themselves at some point in the last 5 years. For the most part, this was prescription drug use. However, in a number of cases, it was not, and as we now know, prescription drug use is a risk factor for escalation into disorder. Nearly half the sample reported knowing someone who's addicted to opioids. Nearly 2/3 of the sample reported knowing someone who's addicted to another substance. Nearly half encountered someone who appeared to have overdosed at least once in the last 3 years, and 70% reported that opioid use is a serious problem in the community. We asked about personal experience with, I think, 15 or so specific indicators of substance use problems associated with substance use in the community. For all but 3 of them, the modal response, the mean response, was over 4 out of 5. So these are significant issues that are impacting Phoenix residents in their daily lives. We asked participants in particular to rate their support for 19 initiatives the City of Phoenix could invest in, including specifics of substance use disorder prevention, harm reduction, and treatment-related strategies. The response scale for each strategy ranged from a 1, which indicates strong opposition, to a 5, which indicates strong support for that strategy, with 3 in the middle indicating neither support nor opposition. The key finding here is that there was strong positive support for every approach included in the study. Most studies were rated with an average above 4, and none were below 3.4. The 5 strategies that were top rated by Phoenix community members were providing programs for pregnant women who use or have used drugs and infants exposed to drugs, providing prevention programs for youth, increasing access to opioid and substance use treatment, particularly free or low-cost, highly affordable treatment, providing social services for substance users, covering social determinants of health, including housing, food, and employment, and increasing education on substance use disorder for law enforcement, first responders, and other Phoenix staff generally, but particularly those who are in highly public-facing positions who are encountering these issues on a day-to-day basis. So, what can we take away from all of these different sources of data? When we consider the Maricopa County needs assessments as well as those conducted specifically in a partnership with the City of Phoenix, there's a great deal of convergence in what the crucial needs are to alleviate the suffering and community impact currently linked to opioid and substance use disorders. For the City of Phoenix, these are investing in ongoing surveillance and reliable data to inform decision-making and evaluate the impact of investments, amplifying dedicated crisis and post-overdose response teams who are trained specifically to handle incidents involving substance use and, in many cases, the co-occurring mental health issues. Investing in evidence-based prevention initiatives in K-12 settings. Increasing access to housing, a previously discussed topic. providing stability that, as Nicole mentioned, supports recovery and encourages treatment seeking. Increased harm reduction outreach aimed at saving the lives of people who use drugs. This includes increased access to naloxone, which reverses opioid overdoses. Investing in dedicated care navigators to help people struggling with substance use disorder access the various social services and forms of care that are needed to have the best shot at recovery. Ongoing diversion away from incarceration and toward treatment for drug-related offenses. Increasing transportation access for people to get to and from services with minimal disruption to their employment, family, and other responsibilities. Expanding mobile services to bring services to people where they are. And addressing the fairly widespread stigma against substance use harm reduction efforts and people who use drugs, given the known evidence that stigma is a barrier to treatment seeking and effective receipt of care for this population.
Our next steps include finalizing the community survey analysis and report, the results that you heard today. We'll integrate all survey findings along with our data and information to identify specific Phoenix priorities for action. And we anticipate bringing forward a substance use strategic plan to council for approval with a 5-year outlook. And from there, we'll bring forward annual action plans that align with the identified priorities for our future investment and funding. And thank you very much for your time, and we're happy to take any questions that you may have.
Thank you. Councilwoman Guardado.
Thank you, Chairwoman. I think, first I want to just thank staff. Thank you guys for all of your hard work. I know that you guys have been wanting to do this presentation for a minute, so thank you for being with us today and talking to us about such an important challenge and issue that we have through our city. I think it is always important to know when talking about addiction and drug use that addiction is not a sign of weakness, a character flaw, or a moral failure. It is a common condition that affects millions of people of all ages, backgrounds, and socioeconomic groups. And while there is no one cause of addiction, there is hope. It can be treated effectively. I want to thank, once again, all of you guys for all of your hard work, for everything that you guys are doing for our city. I just wanted to express my gratitude for your dedicated efforts in raising awareness about addiction and drug use. Your work is essential in breaking down misconceptions and promoting understanding on this important issue. Thank you both for your commitment to addressing this prevalent issue and providing hope through your recommendations, advocacy, and initiatives. And I would like to get a briefing from you guys to see how is it that we can work together on this topic with all of our different neighborhood associations, and how do we get you guys to come to all of our different events. This is the time of the year for D5 that it's incredibly busy. Like, we have at least 2 big events now a month where we gather, over 100 people. So let's get together. Let's talk a little bit more in terms of how is it that we can be helpful and be able to help you guys create more of this awareness. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. And I, too, would like to thank you for your patience. I know you waited a long time last time, and we didn't quite get to you, so I appreciate you coming back. I am incredibly interested in the prevention piece of it, as having been a prior school board member and having raised 2 children. I think it's so important that our young folks understand the risks of even trying one pill. I'm saddened every day when I hear yet another story of that young, bright child who thinks it would be okay just to try one, and one is all it took to end their precious life. So I look forward to hearing more about some hopefully data-proven strategies related to intervention for our children, as well as data-proven strategies for all of these areas and all of our population. But I appreciate you all being here today and look forward to the continued work we have to hopefully, I would like to say eradicate, but I'm sure this problem will be with us for many decades. So thank you for your time. I think you're good. Thank you very much.
Thank you very
Our
much.
next item
Very
is,
much.
I'm sorry, what? Oh, absolutely. You're welcome. Item 4 is our a community assistant program, the recruitment and metric report. And so for that, we have with us Assistant Chief Ochoa and CAP Administrator Ernst. Thank you for joining us. We're going to have to recess for just a minute. Okay. Welcome back. We will now hear about Community Assistance Program.
Thank you, Chairwoman and council members, for having us back today to give you an update on the work that's being done with the Community Assistance Program. This morning, I'll be talking about what our current staffing levels are, the locations of our units, the response types that we're responding to based on units, our time that we spend on scene, the individuals that we serve. We'll discuss the calls that are transferred from the police communication, and then our next steps. In fiscal year 21-22, Mayor and Council approved $15 million to expand the Community Assistance Program. This created 130 new positions. At this time, we've hired 62% of those positions, and we're continuing to recruit for the crucial positions of caseworker 2, which are the individuals that work on our units, and caseworker 3s, who are their supervisors. To date, we have 80 paid employees. We currently have multiple candidates in the hiring process. We have 4 ASU social work interns who are in the process of finishing their year with us in April, while we're recruiting for the next interns for the fall of 2024. Additionally, we currently have 20 volunteers, and we recently, well, in January, recent to me, completed a volunteer interest meeting where we were able to have 6 additional volunteers apply, and they are currently in the background process. We are working closely with HR as we continue to hire for those paid positions. Also, what is not represented on this particular slide is that our community partners have also hired 10 peer support specialists to help us staff our behavioral health units. With our hiring, which includes the peer support specialists, we currently have 4 behavioral health units staffed and 6 crisis response units. With the total of those, we're able to provide for the behavioral health units 7 days a week coverage, 20 hours a day. While all 4 units are not up for that time, again, we are able to cover that expansion of time throughout the week. And again, with the 6 crisis response teams, while they're not all up 7 days a week, we do provide 7 days a week coverage, 24 hours a day. This slide represents where our CR units are currently located. The heat map on the slide indicates where our call volume was throughout February of 2024. The red areas indicate where we had a higher call volume. The blue stars represent where we're currently located, which includes Fire Station 56, Fire Resource Building, a Mountain View Precinct, Old Fire Station 25, and Fire Station 57. The yellows represent the future fire stations, which include Fire Station 62, which we hope we'll be able to move into before the end of 2024. And then thanks to the GO bond passing, the Phoenix Fire Department will be building new fire stations for Fire Station 15, 13, and 7. And as those new fire stations are built and the firefighters move into those, we'll be able to occupy what will then be old fire stations. In 2023, our crisis response teams responded to over 4,800 calls. So far in 2024, the first 2 months, we've seen an increase of calls that we're able to respond to. As you can see in this graph, in July and June of 2023, we had an increase in call volume, and that was because we were able to put another unit in service. So we had 5 units prior to June of 2023, and we now have 26. If you compare February 2023 to February 2024, we've seen an increase of 24% in our call volume. The individuals that we serve, as you can see on this slide, are not the same numbers as the number of calls that we get dispatched out on. Oftentimes with our crisis response teams, we assist more than one individual on a single call. The types of calls that we go on range from natural death, social services, working fires, to crime-related calls such as assault, domestic violence, child abuse, and homicide investigations. Our 3 top resources that we provide are referrals for longer-term services and supportive services, grief and emotional support while we're on scene, and victim advocacy and support. 9 out of 10 of the calls that CR units respond on, they spend anywhere between 2.5 to 3 hours. This includes stabilizing the crisis situation, acting as a liaison between those we're serving and any of our community partners, fire department, and police, as well as providing victim support, education, and transportation as needed. The goals of our crisis response team are to reduce the police and fire time that are on scene, letting them go back into service because we're able to provide a longer-term supportive services, to provide trauma-informed services to reduce the impact of the situation that happened, and to provide those long-term resources. This slide represents where our behavioral health units are located throughout the city. Once again, the blue stars represent where we're currently located at Fire Station 41, Fire Station 57, and at our 2 locations where we lease GCU and NOAA. The yellow represents where we plan on putting teams in the future. The heat map also from February of this year indicates that we do not have a unit currently in the red zone, but we do anticipate putting a unit in that area. The unique part about both our behavioral health units and our crisis response teams is that, unlike police and fire, they don't have what's called a first due area, an assigned area in which they will be dispatched. They can be dispatched throughout the city. The computer automated dispatch system, or our BHU dispatchers for their BHU teams, locate the closest unit and send the closest unit to the call as it comes in. And again, with the growth of the passage of the GO bond, we anticipate going into those fire stations with our BHU units in the future as well. This slide represents the number of calls transferred from police specifically to our BHU dispatcher, and again in 2023 you'll notice that jump in June and July when we went from having 1 unit responding in a small portion of the city of Phoenix to having a total of 4 units now responding citywide. In 2023, police dispatch transferred 842 calls to us. In the first 2 months of this year, they've transferred 193. And again, if you look at February 2023 to February 2024, that's a 300% increase in calls that are being dispatched from PD directly to our units. This slide represents the total number of calls that BHUs have responded to in 2023 and in 2024. You'll notice the numbers are much different than the numbers that are dispatched or sent over from P to dispatch. Our teams not only respond to those calls, but they are also responding out with fire personnel, as well as generating calls as they travel around the city. They may notice an individual who looks like they may need some services. They'll stop and engage with those individuals to see if they can assist. This slide represents the total number of individuals that have been served. You'll find in this slide that the total number of people served is actually lower than the total number of calls dispatched. What we find is that some individuals are calling 911 as they're witnessing individuals on the side of the road who are demonstrating that they may have a need, talking to themselves, walking in and out of traffic. When our teams are dispatched out, sometimes they don't find that individual when they first arrive, but they do take the time to drive around that area and try to identify where that person is. So you'll see that we are dispatched out sometimes and are unable to make contact with individuals. The primary needs of the individuals served are actually identified by the individuals we are serving. So their top 4 identified needs include housing and security, mental health, substance use, and access to services. Our teams also, our goal is to stabilize that individual in place, which means trying to connect them to services which allows them to stay within their community where they're supported. If they need transportation to get that stabilization, we'll provide that transport as well. And we've also transferred people to a higher level of care. A higher level of care could be taking them to their clinic, or it could mean taking them to a psychiatric urgent care facility for additional services. Again, 9 out of 10 times our BHU teams are on scene from anywhere between 1 to 2 hours, establishing rapport, identifying those primary needs, connecting individuals to services, and doing education and resources. Our goal for the BHU units is to reduce police or fire having to respond to calls, making sure that the right service is sent at the right time, connecting individuals into service, and doing that outreach and prevention. Our goals moving forward are to continue to work with our human resource department to continue to hire for these positions so that we can continue to increase the number of CR and BHU units available to respond to calls. We recently hired a curriculum coordinator, and we're looking at the development and training of our staff. We are also working with police communications to identify calls that can be transferred from police to our BHU dispatchers. We're continuing our community outreach, and we're working with our public health division on the heat relief efforts. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Councilman.
Thank you, Chairwoman. Excuse me. Quick question I have for you. The presentation is exceptional. Thank you very much for the information. But if you go back to slide number 3, if possible, and it's a question about continuous recruiting. Seems like caseworker 2s, there's 38 vacancies, and caseworker 3s, there's 12 vacancies. But on the very next slide, you went on to say that there's several folks in the process of under current staffing, multiple candidates in the hiring process. Are you having difficulty filling those particular positions, or is it just the hiring process that's slowing us down to fill those spots?
Chairwoman and Councilmember Robinson, thank you for the question. We are finding some challenges in having individuals accept the positions, and we are working with our HR department to address those needs.
Thank you. I could imagine it's difficult work, and for anyone to think otherwise, they don't have all the information. But thank you for all the information. That was the only question I had, Chair.
Thank you, Councilman Robinson. To his question, I guess, in some cases, Lori, in other departments, I want to say intern, but that's not the right word. We'd created positions where you could come at a level lower than the level we needed. And so have we thought about that in this unit?
Yes, Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee, we actually do have interns that we work with in these positions, and I think you're also potentially thinking of like the apprenticeship programs and how
Yes.
we train people coming in. Some of these positions, there's a little bit higher level of qualification that would make it a challenge for us to do that, but the interns are a good opportunity for us to bring folks in who are either in school or recently were in school and can continue to train them in this profession.
And is ASU the only university that we're working with, or I should say higher ed program that we're working with related to finding interns?
Madam Chair, at this time, yes, ASU is the school that we're working with.
Have we considered, do the community colleges provide the kind of education that our folks would need?
Madam Chair, the community colleges do have some individuals. We are looking also at some other universities to contract with to engage in taking some interns, as well as looking at other fields of study besides social work.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I do appreciate the presentation, and it's exciting to see that we've brought on new units. We're answering more calls and helping both the fire department and the police department while we're providing additional services to our community members. So thank you for all the good work that you all are doing. Great.
Thank you.
Our next two items are for information only. Do we have any additional members for call to the public? So we have no more folks for call to the public. Any future agenda item requests? Great. I think for the first time in history, we're adjourning at 11:09. Have a great day, everyone.
So we had panels with NCAA officials. Governor Hobbs was here being a part of it. Great support